Vloggerdome, the TV show, Episode 8, Virtual Reality, featuring Glynos.
Vloggerdome, yeah. Alright, the virtual reality edition. Yeah, maybe from some different environments. Just to emphasize the point, obviously this reality, yeah, could probably use some perking up. Some fixing to suit me. Um, I'd rather it be something else, the reality. This is a little cold and sharp. Yeah. And nasty. But that's, reality. Reality, we don't weed, we don't clean it up. We just have to accept it for what it is. And the idea is that maybe we would be better off. Maybe it's inevitable, if we're to retain civilization, that we would refine our reality, augment it all the way. Yes, we can always augment it by having, hair implants and other things implanted. We can transhuman. We can modify the parts, and most people seem comfortable enough with that. Go ahead, have some surgeries. Keep yourself going. Alter the reality, transcend reality, fake it. Apply some synthetic parts to the game. Synthetic isn't, people seem to have a rule. They have their own perception of when the synthetic has gone too far, and when you've somehow offended God or nature in attempting to synthesize a better existence. And then the bigger philosophical subject, I think, is just more about whether, again, this is an inevitable transition. If you're going to retain a complex, sophisticated society, civilization, that you're just inevitably going to straighten the line between the entertainment of your psychology and what kind of material reality is required to do that. And if you can run your happiness on a 9-volt battery, full of iPod fantasies, video games, that would be inevitably the course of things. There is there's always the simplest argument too for the naysayers about virtual reality, is that a synthetic reality could be this. It could create this in my head. It doesn't have to. Synthetic realities don't have to be good or even expansive. In terms of, like, if I try to fly, now I can't fly in this reality. Gravity keeps me down. Where in a synthetic reality, yes, I could fly. I could do lots of, I could have the whole Neo experience of the Matrix. But yeah, we can't do that in reality. But virtual reality can do both. Virtual reality can provide the option of I can fly reality, or I can do almost anything. I can be anything. I can be everything. I could be everything at once. Or it could create this, this reality. And even give me a job and force me to do things and give me diseases and all that. It could do all that. But who would choose that, right? Yeah, nobody rational. So anyway, probably enough for this installment. And we'll migrate to a different environment in reality. But most of my real environments are not very real. They are kind of synthetic. That's sort of the joke of it, is that you probably are living in a synthetic reality in the sense that you have perceptions of reality that aren't real. I mean, they're not true. They're fake perceptions, especially if you're religious or some other kind of thing. You have a notion of reality that's just wrong, and therefore it might as well be virtual. It might as well be synthetic, because it's not the real thing, like Coke. Anyway, till almost instantaneously from now.
And now it's time for Adventures of an Antinatalist.
So you don't think we can justify having children, Glynos?
That's right.
Perhaps you'd care to explain why?
Okay, but can we agree on something first?
And what would that be?
Can we establish that some states of being are desirable, whereas other states of being are undesirable?
But people have different preferences, Glynos. You may find eating broccoli desirable, but another person might not. So it's all subjective.
No, that means that some things are subjective, not that all things are subjective. People have a range of opinions about what food tastes good.
That's right.
Yeah, but there isn't a range of opinions on whether it's nice to choke or not.
What?
Nobody likes choking, nobody likes having a steaming hot iron shoved in their face, and nobody likes getting a fucking fork in the eye.
Where are you going with this, Glynos?
I'm just trying to establish the fact that some states of being are undesirable. Not that they're believed to be undesirable, not that they're considered to be undesirable, and not that they seem to be undesirable, but that they are undesirable.
And what does this have to do with having children, Glynos?
Well, if we can first establish that there are potentially desirable and potentially undesirable states, and then show how we can't guarantee a child's protection against the undesirable states, we can make the argument that it is bad to have children.
But ideas of good and bad are subjective constructs of our mind, Glynos. In reality, there are only actions, and we shouldn't spend time worrying about some abstract value that us humans have invented.
Oh no.
Adventures of an Antinatalist will be right back.
Well, I'm back. Yeah, in a completely different environment. Nice and quiet anyway. But anyway, yeah, just reality transitions are rough, right? So yeah, you do have a little bit of that shock when you move from one reality to another. Spiderwebs. Anyway, so I guess let's just go with some of these basic arguments. I would argue that virtual reality is, if there is going to be human civilization 1,000 years from now, it'll have to be migrated into some sort of virtual reality, because people are just incapable of accepting each other's offensiveness. I mean, we offend each other with our philosophies and our psychologies, from what we demand from each other. I just don't think the religions of the world can get along at any point in the history, and they'll not do it in the future either. And even the philosophical disagreements between the capitalist and the socialist and all that kind of stuff, all of that stuff's going to lead to inevitable tensions, and technology is just, it's not going to allow those tensions to be benign. They're going to be turned into something, quite destructive. So you're all kind of doomed. So there's a feasibility argument. I don't think is anything too complicated. Some people just don't think it's possible, but I think, obviously your brain goes into a suspended reality every night when you dream. If you know what a dream is, if you had them, they're quite real, especially in how they feel. And in a synthesis, it seems doable that they could make technology, the technology people could likely make your dreams more rich visually as well. They really don't need any augmentation emotionally. You seem pretty emotionally coherent. It's just the reality is sometimes a little bit fuzzy, indistinct visually. So in that sense, it just seems very doable, because your brain does it all the time. It creates fantasies. You can just turn those on anytime you want to. You can start writing a story and playing out a theme inside your brain. You can close your eyes leave your reality and vacation somewhere. You can do lots of different things with your imagination. So clearly the brain's already got the structure, and it's just stimulating those pieces of neurology. But beyond that, it's fooling the senses, just duplicating the senses doesn't seem all that impossible either. To create some sort of synthetic nerve implant would replace your visual eyeballs with a synthetic view screen, and then just have that oriented to your inner ear, and your orientation to gravity and all that. These are all just these sensors. The sensors of your physical body are I think quite easily, it's easy to imagine them being redesigned and remanufactured and stimulated in a different way. That would all be part of the creation of your virtual or your synthetic experience of life. Just it's not unlike your synthetic experiences now. The synthetic experience of listening to music or watching a movie, or again just even fantasizing. These things all take place with where your focus, the orientation of your consciousness drifts into the medium, whether it be visual or audio or whatever. Your consciousness tends to want to meld, to mix with the media. So I don't think feasibility is, it's quite doable, and quite doable in the next couple hundred years easily. Even full immersion, virtual reality, which would mean, you're basically just a brain. Your body's kept alive, mechanically, and you just experience life as a consciousness, not as a physical thing walking through environments. Instead, you're a consciousness that has environments pass through you. And again, so the only real argument is it necessary, and frankly, is it preferable? And I think the argument would be that it would be preferable. You have more choices. So it's automatically an enhancement of existence. Again, it could duplicate this mold-spotted wall. It can duplicate the cold floor. It could duplicate this environment. It could duplicate a prison cell. It could put you in it. But it can also do things, much more pleasant to imagine than that. And that would be obviously the sensible thing to do, is to take the weeds out of reality. That's all it really is. Virtual reality or synthetic reality is essentially a weed puller. It just allows you to pull all the weeds out of reality, and to make it a very safe place to walk barefoot. To clean. It's an air filter. It's nothing but an enhancement. It doesn't have to degrade any substantive part of your conscious experience. It can enhance entirely. But people don't like it because of this idea or concept of unnaturalness, because they have a religion of, the God of some sort of, trek we make through the world, as if animals need to viscerally, be consumed by the environment, like they have some obligation to serve the billions of years of evolution. That somehow we all have an obligation to live and die as bugs, at the altar of their God, nature. And then there are the overtly or more conventionally religious types who would find it an offense to God's design that we would find a better way to live, free of the necessity of a God for certain. We would no longer need his mercy or his good fortune, because our existence would be not only by choice of will, but by choice by control, of our own capacity to clean it up. We wouldn't need to beg God for a better life. We could just merely be entitled to it, merely just hit the button. Give me everything, let me have it all. Yeah, we wouldn't have to bargain for that. Anyway, so, yeah, enough for this segment, and so I will be back from someplace else, hopefully warmer. It's really cold here. Alright, I'm back. Yeah. So anyway, virtual reality is maybe a fail-safe environment. I guess that's something to keep explaining or pushing on, is the fact that, as people, we are just too offendable. And we also want things sometimes that just aren't practical, that require somebody else's sacrifice, or somebody else to be sacrificed, the other things to be sacrificed. And all of that can be just synthesized. You don't have to eat real meat in virtual reality. The whole matrix syndrome is, you think that's air you're breathing? You don't have to consume anything real. Theoretically, you could just consume a story, consume a piece of celluloid without the celluloid. Live any kind of fantasy, live in any movie you ever heard, live in any story you ever heard, be any character you ever want to be, break all the rules of physics, and do it all in some kind of environment where there's no real victims, where you don't really hurt anything real. Certainly people could choose to have a virtual reality where they live with other real consciousnesses in some shared reality, like the Matrix sort of was. But there's no obligation to do that. There's no obligation to interact with people you can hurt, or choose to be interacted with people in that manner. It all can just be synthesized. Everything we do is mechanical. I mean, this argument, this video, this whatever this is, this show, it's just a synthesis of an argument. It has a purpose in terms of presenting the subject and trying to do it in a manner, like, we're not trying very hard, obviously. I got to do some work on the trying thing, but obviously trying to create it, put it into a format that's going to be more comfortable, that's going to slide into your consciousness without it being obnoxious or irritating or redundant or boring or some other stupid thing that it's going to be. And yeah, but that's all just synthesizing a recipe. It's all just formula, and certainly we could do the formula better. And in the future we probably will, but isn't that just more manipulation then? So here, that's reality. Reality is a constant stream of manipulation, a constant stream of symbols and gestures and icons, and whether they be celebrities, the Coke can, the image. You're just bombarded by an existence in a reality that is all just very superficial. And to say it would be a crime to leave that world for a world that doesn't have any interest in it, except the interest of your consciousness exploring, tasting and touching and sensing and feeling, loving, doing all of that stuff in a world where you can do it without failure, without death, without dread, without the heartbreak of just not being able to pull it off, not being good enough, being too short. All the limitations, all these physical limitations are taken away, and you're allowed to live as powerful as you need to be. I mean, it really just doesn't. You can always up the level of the play, and you can always, just increase your As the skills necessary increase, you just increase how high you can jump. You just change the numbers, just tweak the game. And you can play the game as somebody who knows they're playing a game and just enjoy it for the game. Or you can be immersed in it entirely. I think it's, the whole suspension of disbelief that we do every night when we dream. We enter realities that have nothing to do with our day-to-day reality, and the brain doesn't reject them. It doesn't say, no, this isn't real because this isn't where I live and this isn't how I live. It accepts the scenario. And so again, there's no limitation. I mean, virtual reality doesn't provide a limitation on our existence. It just creates this, just opens all these doors to possibilities that are all positive. And of course, then there is some naysayers that come up with these crazy theories, like the evil people will somehow control it, and they'll control our mind for what purpose? Create a Borg that does what? Manufactures what? Genetically augmented wheat that nobody eats? I mean, what exactly would they be using us for? They always have to come up with kind of crazy scenarios to demonize virtual reality, like the Matrix did. I came up with this preposterous premise, that machines would use human beings, which aren't very good batteries, use human beings as batteries, which is just kind of a joke. I mean, why would you create a virtual reality for human beings when you could just create a virtual reality for pigs? That's even if biological organisms were any good at creating energy, which they're not, are converting energy. So that's the joke of it. Humans don't have any value. The only thing that's at all interesting about us is the fact that we do have this neurology and this capacity to live out a story and do it with these emotions, this passion and this hunger and this desire. It's about the only thing we're good at creating, right? Is addiction and attachment. And that's what we get exploited for, is our capacity to become addicted and attached to somebody else's heroin, to somebody else, the heroin the pushers are pushing. That's all there is. There's just pushers and addicts. So what do we lose by, drifting out of this reality of exploiters and addicts? Yeah, no, it's all win if we can do it. We probably don't have enough time. Civilization isn't going to stay together long enough to create a good virtual reality. It's just going to be some kind of tacky little, wanking machine, or little silly headsets are very big right now, as if this is our only sense, which it certainly isn't. But it's going to take time to get the rest of it done right, done well. But the efficiency, again, is just so, if you want to have 7 billion people or 7 trillion people, the only way you can have all these consciousnesses doing all of this consciousnessing is to minimize how much it costs. It costs 100 watts to run the brain, essentially. Well, a good 70 or 80 watts. Most of your body power goes to feeding your brain's creating consciousness, keeping the lights on up there. And interestingly though, the amount of watts it would take to entertain that is probably 2. So it's kind of the part that's going to be the biggest consumer of energy. It's going to be this, the biological remnants of our existence. Back again. Anyway, distractions. So I guess there's some point just pointing out that this whole conversation about virtuality is sort of just an argument to placate the need for existence in the first place. It's like this, how do you migrate into a future where people know what we are? Once you know what we are, we're just devices seeking entertainment. We're just people in need of an adventure. Some notion of accomplishment and success and acquisition and having. And it's all taken away anyway in the end. You know, and this, you know, most people just have some sort of conventional, fabulistic, fairy tale, religious perception of reality. They think they're accomplishing something in the service of some god's aspiration for us. You know, to, you know, it's where his porn, you know, we're some god's porn. He likes watching us struggle and die. But yeah, I mean, once, you know, you kind of get a grasp of reality, you'll kind of see that virtual reality is just, if you're going to be bothered having consciousnesses buzzing around, eking out an existence, you might as well have them do it in a safe environment, where you can maximize their pleasure and minimize their misery. It's just logical. Maximizing pleasure and minimizing misery. It's logical. But of course, people have a reverence for some sort of real game, some sort of real contest. Let's really kill each other. Let's really defeat each other. Let's really humiliate each other. Let's do that all really. Yeah. And then the joke is they're defending that reality, and, you know, when every statistic points out that there are really no winners. All the celebrities die. Yeah, they all do. There's nothing endures it. Nothing keeps all their parts. You're reduced to a virtual you, something much less than yourself. In the end, is what will be the survivor. For what? So yeah, this is only placating human beings that somehow need to cling to the idea that consciousness is doing something meritorious besides just feeding needs contrived by a molecule to keep us playing a silly game of chase and grab and take and eat, consume, reproduce in some sort of addictive manner that just leads to a kind of cannibalism. And that's their god. That's their totem pole. So even virtual reality as a subject is always going to have to be understood in the context that it would be a completely different conversation if you didn't have to have the conversation with a vast majority of people who can't step outside of their own conscious ownership. The fact that they are just owned by their nature, owned by their culture, and owned by their traditions. They can't step out of any of that stuff. I'd say that the intelligent conversation regarding virtual reality would be an acknowledgement that, well, look, you know, we can do this thing. But frankly, if we ever get to if we ever get to a point in human evolution where we're civilized enough to provide virtual reality in a nice, honest, fair, and free way, you know, just for the benefit of consciousness, you know, like landing on the moon or something, you land on virtual reality just because it's there to do, and it can be done, and so you master it, you know, because it does create almost an ideal environment to preserve consciousness, to, you know, let it play out its game, let the game play out without having to deal with some emotional problems you might have with the idea of failure, that the human race actually failed in the end, that it was actually consumed by thermodynamic reality. Oh my. But that's the inevitable truth. The universe is going to consume it. It's going to consume every bit of this whole canard, this whole lie of doing something that's meaningful besides just shoot ourselves up with you know, the heroin of God, or, you know, the heroin of ultimate porn. They're both a heroin of sorts. They're both just a drug, both just an addiction, just a notion in your head that needs satisfying. That's all. There's no notion in reality. That's sort of the joke. There's no reality. that can justify the existence of a virtual reality. Because there's no reality that demands our existence, that demands the existence of 7 billion consciousnesses, or 7 trillion consciousnesses, or 7 consciousnesses. There's nothing in the universe that says what the right number is, or nothing in the universe that says there has to be any at all. Nothing rational, nothing logical. All that exists is your desire that the Mets win the World Series. A desire just made out of culture and your personal subjective conditioning. A manifestation of a crude hunger for victory that exists inside of you. You're hungry for a win, and you'll even take one vicariously. You'll accept winning by having somebody else do the work, and you just feed on their feeding, feed on the spectacle, much like porn, I suppose. Just feed on the spectacle. So I mean that'd be an honest description or discussion of virtual reality. It's the fact that we wouldn't really need it if we were smart enough to do. If we become smart enough to do it well, we'll be smart enough to know it's not necessary. That there's no real need to be served in bottling up consciousness and entertaining it redundantly for the sake of it, because we will still just exist for the sake of it, because the real context of our existence is we're just bugs, we're just little machines perpetuated through a mechanism of evolution to do nothing but fight a stupid war for the success of do-over, 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 do it over, do it over, do it again, do it over, do it again, do it over. That's all that's going on. There's nothing else happening here. So anyway, that's just kind of the dismal side of the whole subject. Yeah, because the rest of it is just indulging in fantasy. The rest of it is just sort of just vicariously feeding off of imagining the little worlds you can play in and the little things you can do, and it's like imagining Christmas as a kid. You're just indulging fantasy and wishful thinking and wantful thinking, I suppose is a better way to put it, just indulging wantful thinking instead of recognizing the fact that it's not something you'd want to impose. It's not a cage you even want to have to build. Better never to have been in that sense. If you're just going to be in a cage, and that's all you are now. You're in a cage of natural reality. You're in the cage of the circumstance of your birth, the circumstance of your, what culture maturated you, which one gave you a language, which one got you attached to an idea that then destroyed and took away. Much like the whole idea of, it's like, as capitalism burns itself out, it kind of gave you this lie that, there was a game to play, that there was a place where you could earn your seat somewhere, and all that's just evaporating. And then people are addicted to it. They need it, and it's not there. They're going to keep pretending it's there. It's not there. It's no good game to play. And it's time to just smell it and reject it. So, I stated in other videos this, the simple-minded stupidity of the average human consciousness is the real problem in having a discussion about anything, because it doesn't understand the reality it's existing in now. Most human beings are idiots. They don't acknowledge reality. They're running from it desperately, and they're running to something without any rational foundation, just absolute crap, silly stories really old, silly stories. The oldest kind of book of voodoo. It's like they reject medicine and run to the book of voodoo. And they're doing it because obviously the prescription of the modern medicine is brain, heal thyself, um, pretty much by just curing the need. Eliminate the need and there's no need. There's no remainder, nothing left behind, no negative residue. So, anyway, until the next segment, coming up right about now.
And now back to Adventures of an Antinatalist.
Oh no. There's no way you believe that.
Just because you can't understand something, Glynos, doesn't mean that it's not true.
Just admit it. Some things are bad.
Oh, Glynos.
What?
Can't you see that you're too deeply into philosophy?
What does being too deeply into philosophy mean?
It happens when people feel disillusioned and rejected by society.
Well, I didn't ask about how it happens. I asked about what it means to be too deeply into philosophy.
Well, a person who is too involved in philosophy means that he or she is so involved in philosophy that it affects their levels of happiness.
And why is that a problem?
Because unhappy people have a tendency to carry out destructive behavior.
But productive and destructive are just subjective ideas. They're not really productive or destructive, and really there's no difference between them in terms of importance, is there?
Well, it's a matter of,
I'm right though, aren't I? Constructive and destructive, it's all relative, isn't it?
well, you are right, Glynos, but,
So I can just do this and it doesn't really matter.
Anton, no!
What's wrong? It seems like you're placing value on subjective feelings, but we all know that subjective feelings have no value or meaning, so what's the point? You're a lying little duplicitous cunt.
Well, suppose I should do one of these segments from a darker place, where you sort of have to maybe make up a world, fill in the blank kind of thing. Should do it in the total dark, maybe with a flashlight, right? Just add the atmospherics, add the superficial illusion, and how we do need that. We need, often we need anyway, rules of aesthetics. Things have to fit into our expectation. Something often can't be too simply done. And in other places we cut it some slack, which is sort of interesting. Simpsons aren't a very well drawn cartoon. People accept that. It's funny. It's got something else going for it, I suppose. So you could do it out of stick figures, I guess, if it's written well enough. I guess I could argue that this performance that I'm doing is neither written well enough or performed well enough. But just the idea that the people, I guess, I would argue many of the people who would be against some sort of virtual reality are the very people who demand, a very high standard of performance. The people who have the expectations that are extravagant and what somebody might say excessive. The people who demand the value added, the sugar, the sweeteners, all the little subtle crap that isn't really the substance. So that's sort of the joke. Is the substance of life is the reality of a consciousness, the reality of communicating as consciousnesses with each other, communing in some sort of genuine and real way. And yet like I said, the people who are supposed to have some reverence for the function of consciousness are the ones most likely compelled to act out of superficiality. They won't vote for a ugly president, and everything has to fit into these molds of their expectations. And again, it's all about the superficiality and not the substance. The story has to be told in cinematography. It has to be widescreen, big screen cinematography, all the crap, right? And that's the only way you can provoke emotion out of them, is with the trivial physical dynamics of substance, but the substance they're claiming to have reverence for, they demonstrate to not take very seriously. So it is just one of those ironies of existence. So people, it's just part of it's not an irony, it's just a fact of human nature, that people are kind of hypocritical. I don't even know what you can use the word, just because I don't think they do it on purpose, but they're just so driven by psychology rather than anything thoughtful. They think so little, and they are just so reactive, and you can see that inconsistency will show up, the consequence of a superficial psychological existence. You can see it in those obvious duplicities, the double standards that exist. My religion good, their religion bad. Just the obvious ones like that. And so, yeah, any kind of conversation about a fake reality where you might want to almost face the world blind and just live experientially would be a totally viable way of interacting as a consciousness. I can certainly imagine there being much richness through experience, just experiencing it as a sensation, as a sound even. Like each sense has a depth that we never really get to experience. We're never able to take those senses very far, because they're stuck, attached to this body, and stuck in this material reality where you can't dive into the sun, you can't swirl inside of a plasma, you can't break these rules of physics, and the rules of physics will be too hostile to your senses. So there needs to be a remanufacture, a resynthesis of your experience, to really get the most out of it, to swim to the bottom of the ocean, to fly in space, to do all these kinds of things to break dimensions, to break limitations, things we can't do physically, but we are able to do them if our consciousness were liberated. We can experience anything from any perspective, theoretically. And clearly we'd want to be able to, some of us, to be able to retain some natural function, some connection to our origin. People may want that visceral connection, but I would argue that once they've let go of that and become a ghost, become anything, become many things, form might not be so important, and the experience of consciousness there might be a tendency, once you've tasted that, once you've tasted the freedom of not being confined in a skull, in a body, maybe it would be quite liberating to exist as a feeling and not exist as a form. But anyway, that's all just more expansiveness on it. You know, that what's the nature of your consciousness? And the nature of your consciousness is just a bundle of feelings, a bundle of sensations, and the idea of value. Most of what you value are projections of value, and they have to do with some sort of conquest and superiority, playing some alpha competition game, gaining advantage, gaining power, gaining control. And in a virtual world, that control can be so expansive, so detailed, so extensive, that maybe exercising control will be more important than possessing control or obtaining control, because it will be so readily attainable. It won't be, your focus won't be that insecure grasping for control, that desperate grasping, and more you will just be driven by more sincere and more genuine hungers of your curiosity and your passion and your striving to get deeper and closer and deeper and closer, and all kinds of sensations, anything imaginable and anything unimaginable. Yeah, lots of potential for creation of experience. And isn't that all life is a package of experiences? And I certainly could argue that most of them are, in this material reality, are just burdensome experiences. Experiences washing the dishes, and, you know, bandaging a wound, dealing with a headache, you know, managing your life, managing the physical requirements, paying the bills to manufacture your physical safety, your physical protection, your physical maintenance, and in a way that's highly expensive, not only in terms of material cost, just in terms of matter having to be manipulated and orchestrated in a shape to suit you, has to conform to your aesthetics usually. Fortunately, I don't have that problem. Yeah, I'm not too upset by negative aesthetics, but many people are. Yeah, but it's also what it costs. You know, you have to essentially enslave people to burdens in their lives to finance your comfort. I mean, your comfort isn't free. Other people have to manufacture it for you at their expense of their comfort. So it's very inefficient. Where in a virtual world, it costs just as much to make a cardboard homeless shelter as it does the biggest castle in the universe. Those two images, those two realities, those two synthetic realities require an equal amount of creation energy. And so clearly it's all about your preference, and there is no limitation of practicality anymore. You don't have to obey your pancreas or your liver or gravity or the physical material reality of how valuable your skills are in the world, so you can acquire enough wealth to be able to afford a soft enough bed to sleep in, or a quiet enough place to put your bed so you can sleep. Anyway, yeah, so look, you're already in the fake delusional reality of whatever crap you've made up to live by, and you'll lose nothing by giving up on the idea of physically marching your consciousness through a slow and thick physical reality, a narrow, very, very poorly drawn, very narrowly drawn almost a trail of tears, when you can take it to your consciousness anywhere. It's just ludicrous to choose the prison. Yeah, it's really just insane to say, yes, give me jail. Give me the material jail instead of the wide open, immaterial, infinite reality. It is an infinite reality. Synthetic reality is infinite reality. Maybe we should just rename it, and people might like it more, like the idea of it more. Anyway, until next time. Alright, summing up, kind of, sort of. So where are we? Yes, understand first, your psychology is just a thing that needs entertaining. You're just a spectator, consciously, and you're waiting for something good to happen. Where's the good stuff? Have an adventure. Have something happen that is intriguing and fun, and like a good smell. Something that makes you want for more. Get you hungry. Get you in the mood to chase, to play along. And so you're just after an adventure of some kind. And obviously video games have made that very real for people in terms of having a life experience, playing a sport even. Video games kind of like a sport, playing the sport that they can control and manipulate. They can change the height of the hoop, so to speak. They can change how high the bar is they have to jump over. And so they can feel kind of good about it, feel good about themselves. And virtual reality just adds another dimension to the gameplay, more levels to play at, and it just becomes about, in many ways, just meeting some personal standards of performance, and having everything good in terms of the opportunity to win, and with minimal loss in terms of any real damage done, beyond just having to start over or hit the retry button. And yeah, there's so many ways you can format virtual reality again if you're really fixed on having interactions with real people because they have nuance and you think it's more engaging. It certainly would be possible, but clearly synthetics were pretty easy to synthesize. A human being isn't what it used to be in terms of a perception of what we do as a personality, and it's certainly, I think, well within our grasp to create synthetic personalities that don't do much else than what I'm doing. They just react to stimulus. They hear a sentence, they respond with a sentence. It's not that complicated. And clearly, we can engineer a world for even what might be considered to be sick psychologies, ones that are broken and can have reverse associations, associate other people's pain with some way for them to derive pleasure. And they could do it harmlessly. Nazis can kill all the Jews they want in a virtual reality and no one really suffers. And I'm not saying that should be the function of virtual reality, but it's just saying that it is a fact. It really doesn't matter what kind of, what flavor of ice cream you're eating, as long as you're eating ice cream. It's all the same. It's synthetic, it's harmless, and it just doesn't make any difference. Yeah, there's nothing really to achieve in life. You're just achieving an adventure. You're just achieving a state of mind where you feel comfortable with the world that exists, or comfortable with your situation, your position in the world as you've described it. And as stated in the beginning of this video, I think I stated it, your current reality is a delusion, probably, of you've probably gotten a lot of facts wrong about what reality is. And so you're already living in a fake world. And so there's really nothing to sacrifice or compromise. And to live in the real world is just basically to live in a world where you'd have to concede you're just a psychology that needs. And having that as a thought doesn't do you any good. It's not much of an adventure to diagnose the human condition as just being an animal organism, parasitic animal organism, full of contrived passion, and the passion is just contrived to get it to eat, sleep, fornicate, for the purpose of modifying a molecule, creating a more durable organism. Not much to live for there. So again, nothing to sacrifice in terms of synthesizing something more purposeful or more beautiful. A better delusion to live by. And that's what virtual reality promises. So the real point is we probably won't get there because we don't have enough of a civilization to survive the technology needed to create a good virtual reality. So at best we'll have a sloppy transhumanistic, augmented, fake parts maybe, but nothing grand. If with the current civilization, with people so obsessed with the maintenance of a hierarchy and maintenance of a ownership society, it probably won't be implemented in some fair access way. The ideal is just to find a safe place to store consciousness, and if people figure out some way to monetize that, then nothing splendid will happen. So anyway, probably enough as a foundation for the subject of virtual reality. And the next go round, we'll see if we can add a little more character to the conversation and such. A little more entertainment value, perhaps. Yeah, sorry. Just talking doesn't do much for most people. Anyway, more virtual candy, more dressing, more cosmetic crap. Yeah, it is ironic. That's what's required to have a serious conversation, is production values. I think that's what's required to have propaganda. But anyway, till the next subject and such.
Want to see more of Vloggerdome? Want to make a counter-argument to anything said in this episode or one of our others? Please visit us at www.vloggerdome.com. See more episodes, conversations, extras, contests, live events, and more on our YouTube channel, Vloggerdome. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and come chat with us on the Video Soap forums, where you can make text arguments that might even end up on the show. We hope to hear from you. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Vloggerdome. Join us next month for our physics episode. See you then!